What's going on? Welcome back to Financial Journey. So today when I go over some expectations for this upcoming week, what might cause some volatility in the stock price, and go over everything else you need to know. But first, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up. And with that, let's get right to it. So starting off with data points, not a whole lot. So Sunday evening, you do have a couple to take note of. So unemployment, retail sales, industrial production. A lot of those could really push Chinese stocks higher, as what happened last week. We had a lot of big data coming in better than anticipated. So again, that could play a part. On the American front, the only day to really pay attention to is Wednesday, and that is because of the interest rate decision. Obviously, there won't be any cut, but what Powell says afterwards, that is really going to drive the market higher or potentially break it down. In my opinion, I think he's going to just ultimately reiterate what he stated 2 weeks ago, that the economy is strong and that essentially there isn't any justified reasons for rate cuts. So in my opinion, algorithmic trading is going to really push a lot of stocks because of that. So that's why I'm bringing this up. But a couple other things, as far as this upcoming week, you do have XPeng's earnings on Tuesday morning. And so even with Lee's last Friday, I would have assumed that technically they would have traded kind of par. So whenever there's a negative with one, kind of piggybacks to the other. Market didn't actually treat it as though. So NIO did get a little bit of a upper edge on that. XPeng, it is fair to assume that obviously maybe if they flop in their earnings, NIO will really push higher. But no matter what, NIO's upcoming earnings this Friday is going to be a very big deal. Current estimates right now for earnings per share, you have negative $2.42. That did go a little bit lower. So previously it was negative $2.41. So most likely one analyst did kind of change their estimate, because you can kind of change an estimate without changing a rating. I think a lot of people don't really understand that, but ultimately maybe they changed it for the negative only because a lot of the recent news about potentially layoffs, cutting expansion, trying to control costs and whatever else. So that usually is seen as a good thing, but if announced right before their earnings, it usually does signal that they burnt a little bit more cash than what they were assuming. And I think the latest news that did come out about them really cutting their expansion, that's probably the culprit in reality. And I think analysts are starting to pick up on that. So don't be surprised if essentially they do miss on their earnings per share. Aside from that though, revenue, you have the estimate being 20.16 billion. So pretty good stuff for that. Previously, the estimate was 20.12. So doesn't matter about the earnings per share potential miss. Analysts are a little bit more optimistic. So there was a recent re-rating to be positive. So again, that's kind of a good thing overall. So ultimately, though, it's going to come down to future guidance, what they give for the foreseeable future, how in their eyes everything is playing out. Are they still on target and everything? So at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a crazy roller coaster, but I think all in all, it should work out fairly fine in my opinion, but sometimes NIO has other plans. So no matter what though, that is going to cause a lot of volatility. Giving you a quick overview of this though, current implied move is 10.76%. So aside from, it looks like Q4 2023, that was the only time it was like at 15.95% for volatility. So when it comes down to this time around, you see a 53 cent move in either direction. So just anticipate a lot of volatility regardless, but yeah, it should be a fun time. So hopefully it does really piggyback off the recent momentum and really is at that $5 range going into earnings. I think that'd be a good position overall, but ultimately, when it comes down to shorts, they will be ready to pounce. Going into this week, 15.12% of the free float is being shorted. Works out to be 201.97 million shares overall are being shorted. Shorts at the end of Friday did end up returning 1.16 million shares. You see that sign of manipulation did drop. So you've often enough seen the cost to borrow minimum be negative. So that does mean that there is a broker out there physically paying people to short NIO. So if they do, let's say, miss on some aspect of their earnings, let's say future guidance for something or whatever else, then you'll see shorts probably pounce. But given where NIO did land on Friday, you can kind of see based on the open interest. So it did, unfortunately, that 31,000 and above all expired worthless. So you have 13,000 at that 450 and then 4,000 at that 4. So ultimately just shy of around 2 million shares does need to be covered, whether it be done after hours on Friday or potentially sometime on Monday or even in the foreseeable future. Market makers will have to cover that, and they don't really have a lot of inventory of volatile stocks such as NIO, so they will have to go to the open market to do that. So something to kind of keep in mind. You might see a little bit of a blip up as soon as the market does open come Monday. But aside from all of that fun stuff though, with it at $4.90, it is trading right between this R1 and the pivot. So 460 is going to be that strong support, and flip side 502 is going to be the next strong target slash resistance. Actually going back over here for 1 second, just take note of some of this upcoming week's kind of open interest. So you do see some pretty big walls. So for the week ending March 21st, 2025, you have 18,000 at that 4, 11,000 at that 450, 88,000 at that 5, 21,000 at that 550, and then 35,000 at that 6. So come Friday, post earnings, if let's say NIO is flirting with that $6 range or potentially even that $5 range, this is where shorts could really wake up and really try to suppress NIO, as what probably happened on Friday. So I think in reality, NIO did want to move higher with the broader market. It was just getting suppressed. And for those of you that watched my video on Friday, I did clearly state, I did it pre-market, that NIO was going to really struggle with that 491 mark and as well $5. And that's just because of the options and whatever else. But going forward into this week, just take note of some of the strong support and resistance points. But aside from all that fun stuff though, this is what analysts are currently saying going into the earnings. So post earnings, you should see a rush probably of around 6 or 7 new ratings in my opinion. But as a consensus, $5.25 is that price target, representing a 7.14% upside. So hopefully we start to see maybe 8s, 9s, or even double-digit ratings once again, because currently the highest rating was done 2 months ago, and it is $8.90, and that is done by Citi. Jeff, who has a 44% success rating, so not all that great. But looking forward into this upcoming week, it is below the ALMA of that 491. So again, it really needs to close above that. But aside from that though, going into this week, it actually does have some pretty good momentum. So still above a lot of the key pivotal moving averages that I like to look at. So the 50, 100, 200-day moving averages, it's above all of that. 50-day is sitting at 471. So that's going to be another element that you really need to watch for. So that 471 is going to be right above this 460. So just watch for 471, 460 for support levels, and even in NIO's case, that 50-day moving average is a pretty big deal. Going into this upcoming week though, stochastic RSI, it is somewhat in neutral territory, so it's not really overbought, not oversold, but I think given the circumstances of how I see things playing out for this week, I feel like NIO is going to kind of move higher up until their earnings, and then essentially that would put it in overbought status for the most part, and then dependent on the results, it could really push higher to, let's say, that $6 range, or potentially could really break it down below that 50-day moving average. It's going to be anyone's guess on what could come, but I do unfortunately think that a lot of that recent news that did come out is signaling that NIO did burn through a little bit more money than what they previously maybe thought, or even what analysts did previously think. So that is something just to kind of keep in mind. But aside from that, I think that there's going to be a lot of good optimistic things being announced. So this is a quick summary of things that you need to keep in mind, what could move the market and NIO and everything else. So hopefully everyone's having a good weekend. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. I always greatly appreciate that. Throw your price prediction for the end of the week. Where do you think NIO is going to go? Do you think it's going to go to, like, let's say 6, 7, or do you think it's going to break down to the 4, 3, or do you think it's going to go to 100? I've seen some crazy price targets on there saying that by the end of Q3 it's going to be at $45. I don't see how that, even in the best case scenario, is feasible, but dreamers like to dream, but whatever, I'm not there to pop their bubble. So let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up. One final thing, pop over to my Patreon. I give buy signals on stocks, options, and crypto. Many of them have been absolutely on point and bangers. Definitely worthwhile to pop over there and take a look. With all that, appreciate all of you watching.